Under a massive canopy of bright stars, the camera finds the shattered remains of a fortress. The ground is smashed and broken, looking like a brutal war just tore through it. Suddenly, a fist punches up through the piles of heavy stone, and a man buried underneath fights to pull his body out. A deep voice speaks about a star that never rises to the top of the heavens, stuck in corners where nobody looks. However, that star can still glow brightly, provided it keeps a fire burning inside its soul. The narration clearly describes the battered man who just clawed his way out of the ruins. He leans heavily on his blade to get up, gasping for air as the icy night wind hits him. The view changes completely. We now see a young boy standing in front of a shop, eyes fixed on a sword hanging on the wall. His bright blue eyes are glued to the metal as it sparkles with a magical light. He whispers to the empty street, admitting that no matter how often he visits, the weapon never fails to amaze him. His focus is shattered when a voice yells out to him. Looking annoyed, he spins around to face the person who broke his trance. It is a woman named Xena, and she notes that she knew she would catch him right here, staring at that blade as usual. We learn the boy is named Vlad. Xena looks him over with a critical eye and mentions that he has been acting very distant and unfocused these past few days. Vlad bites back, warning her not to push him and pointing out that she is ruining one of his few peaceful breaks. Xena doesn't blink, simply telling him that his weird actions are the reason folks have started gossiping about him. Vlad goes stiff, totally caught off guard, and demands to know exactly what she is implying by that statement. Seeing she said too much, Xena starts to feel nervous. Instead of explaining, she looks away and quickly tries to talk about something else. She asks Vlad if he is still hearing those voices whenever he picks up a stick. Vlad says nothing, his face going completely blank, taking his silence as a yes. Xena wonders out loud what sort of terrible crime he must have done in a previous life to deserve this. We find out that Vlad was once hit by lightning on a sunny day, but it was black lightning, not the normal kind. Xena says this almost never happens and warns him to keep a low profile inside the shop for the time being. She tells him the new bishop cares deeply about dark omens. She adds that the man used to hunt heretics and can sniff out anything strange. If Vlad attracts attention, they will drag him off and burn him at the stake instantly. Hearing this news just makes Vlad feel worse, realizing his very survival is in danger. Xena explains she is only speaking up because she cares about his safety. She points out that crowds saw the black lightning hit him and stories are traveling fast. She begs him one more time to quit standing in the open looking at the weapon because the church soldiers could arrive any second. Vlad shakes his head, insisting he won't be treated like a prisoner just for appreciating a fine piece of steel. Xena finally gets fed up, calling him thick-headed and telling him to just purchase the sword and be done with it. The issue, naturally, is the cost. Vlad confesses he doesn't have the coin. Xena waves her hand, saying it must be cheap and is likely a fake made by some crook. She even volunteers to pay for it herself. After a pause, Vlad whispers that the sword costs 5 gold. Xena's face drops as she understands how insane the price tag is. Her brain starts counting all the things that much money could get, and Vlad smugly finishes her thought by saying she could quit working for a whole year. Suddenly, a shouting voice cuts them off. An old man storms toward them, mad that Xena spoke badly about his sword. The man screams at them to get out. Judging by his apron, he is obviously the blacksmith. He snarls that the weapon isn't for gutter trash like them. Xena yells right back, asking who he expects to buy it if not the locals, seeing as his shop is right in the middle of the slums. She keeps going, asking if the old man has completely lost his mind. The blacksmith goes berserk at being called elderly. Xena pours oil on the fire by teasing him, guessing he is making blades for noble knights because his days are numbered. A blood vessel bulges on the man's forehead as he roars back, calling her a stupid girl and ordering her to go back to her shop and scrub the floors. Hurt by his words, Xena yells that she is an adult. As the fight gets louder, Vlad grabs her arm and drags her away from the scene. As they retreat, the blacksmith keeps screaming, calling Xena toxic and spoiled. He then looks down at the footprints Vlad left in the dust, realizing the boy had been standing there for ages. He sneers, thinking Vlad should focus on staying alive rather than daydreaming. The blacksmith pulls the weapon off the wall, making up his mind to sell it to someone who actually deserves it. He thinks to himself that children from this district never amount to anything. In his eyes, the sword is just like Vlad, still glowing bright, even though it is stuck in a place nobody cares about. The camera zooms out to show Sora, the center of trade in the north. But even this rich city has a dark side in its slums, where all the rejected things end up. Inside a busy pub, men are drinking and shouting. The room goes quiet when a bare-chested mercenary seizes a woman named Marcella by her hair, claiming she ripped him off with fake medicine. Vlad walks in, and the fighter identifies him as the candle maker. Vlad answers coldly that seeing the boss requires gold coins, not silver. Enraged, the mercenary shouts that Vlad cheated him with a candle that melted way too fast. Vlad stays cool, candle, stating the man should have bought a bigger candle, and telling him to take his temper somewhere else. The soldier gets ready to fight, so Vlad offers a bet. They light a new candle. If it burns for exactly 5 minutes, the soldier pays up. If it fails, Vlad takes a beating. Vlad's blue eyes shine with a faint light, which makes the big man nervous. 5 minutes pass, and the fire goes out instantly. Before the soldier can move, Vlad smashes him in the jaw with his wooden staff, kicks him into the back room, and bolts the door shut. The man pleads for mercy from the other side, but Vlad thrashes him without stopping for trying to rob the shop and for insulting his mother. The next morning, Vlad informs George that someone has been messing with the candle supply. The madam is angry, until Marcella happily confesses that she shortened the wicks to fool drunk clients. Vlad stands there in shock, realizing he beat up the mercenary for absolutely no reason. As he walks downstairs, a gang boss named Burley catches him and demands payment. He drags forward a small boy named End, calling him a worthless thief. Burley says he will give the kid back for 40 silver coins. Vlad hands over the cash instantly, then coldly suggests they should just kill the thieves next time, instead of wasting his time. Once the gang is gone, Vlad lectures Ned. The boy says sorry, and after making sure the kid isn't hurt, Vlad sends him away. Vlad feels sad, knowing his goal of saving 5 gold has been pushed further away again. Later, he goes to see Harbin, a man who works for Captain Hoover, the whale hunter. Harbin tells him to keep his eyes open, explaining that when people like Marcella start making money quickly, a war is usually on the horizon. Finally, we meet the 5 lords who run the slums of Sora: George the Whore's Knight, Black Bear the Swine Butcher, Dice the Gambler, Captain Hoover the Whale Hunter, and one-armed Jack the Moneybug. As their power grows, the darkness begins to tighten around Vlad. The threat becomes real when Moneybug's crew shows up at his shop, hunting for their leader. Vlad froze, staring in pure shock. He couldn't wrap his head round the fact that the infamous Moneybug was standing right there in his shop. His eyes drifted to one-armed Jack, and a cold thought hit him. Had the war preparations begun already? A sudden shout shattered his focus. It was one of Moneybug's lackeys, a guy with a ponytail and a nasty scar, screaming at him. He called Vlad a brat for ignoring the boss, and demanded to know where the owner was. Instantly, our hero frowned, replying calmly that he was just a simple candle seller and didn't know. Mr. Poniel, clearly short on patience, hurled another insult and slammed his fist onto the table, threatening the boy. The impact sent candles flying everywhere, yet Vlad didn't flinch. He just locked eyes with the thug, proving he wasn't scared at all. The other workers were shaking in their boots, especially the women watching the chaos unfold. Their jaws practically hit the floor as they waited for the next move. Without a word, Vlad dropped to one knee and started gathering the expensive wax candles that had smashed on the ground. He decided to poke the bear, coolly mentioning that the shop was now closed for the day. This only made Ponytail more furious. He couldn't stand being ignored by some kid. As Vlad reached for another broken piece, he sharply told the thug to move his feet. That pushed the guy over the edge. He swung a vicious kick at the kneeling boy, but our hero was faster. With a snap of his trusty wooden staff, Vlad cracked the attacker's leg in midair. Ponytail stumbled, losing his balance, and with bold confidence, Vlad slammed the staff right into his face. The thug collapsed to the floor in a heap. The onlookers were totally stunned, unable to speak. Moneybug, however, looked like he was enjoying the show. Vlad's eyes glowed a fierce blue as he glared at the fallen man. He pressed the staff against the guy's cheek, a symbol of the back alley's golden rule. The winner stands tall, while the loser stays in the dirt. Seeing their friend humiliated, Moneybug's crew roared with rage. They prepared to rush Vlad, but Moneybug suddenly ordered them to freeze. The boss waved his metal hook, leaving his men completely baffled as to why he wouldn't let them attack. The giant man explained that he actually liked Vlad's style, and to everyone's surprise, he started clapping. Even with only one good hand, he was impressed enough to applaud the candle seller. He asked the boy to forgive the commotion. Vlad, cool as ice, simply replied that he didn't discriminate against the disabled. The guy really had no fear. Instead of getting angry, Moneybug found the insult hilarious and burst into loud laughter. He told Vlad he wanted a private word with him later. The red-eyed crime boss reached out with his hook, tapping the boy's face, and asked if Vlad remembered who he had taken away in the past. Vlad shot back that the person must have died young because he didn't recall a thing. Their intense stare-down was cut short when a voice called out from the entrance. They both spun around, surprised to find George and his team standing there. George cracked a joke at Moneybug, saying he would have grilled some meat if he'd known guests were coming, but the mountain of a man brushed it off, reminding George they weren't exactly friends. Still, George treated him like a guest and invited the group upstairs. Jack mentioned he'd prefer fine liquor over food and demanded a drink. The knight's green eyes glowed with a scary intensity as he promised Moneybug that Marcella never failed when it came to hospitality. The intruder's red eyes flashed with that same deadly energy as he agreed to taste the liquor. One of the henchmen helped the dazed Ponytail to his feet, and the boss led his crew up the stairs. Once Once the heavy tension lifted, Vlad let out a long, shaky breath, realizing just how close he had come to dying right there. A bit later, he finished cleaning up the mess and wondered just how many candles Ponytail had ruined. His thoughts were interrupted by Moneybug's voice calling him a shining star. It seemed the boss and his crew were leaving. After their talk with George and Marcella, the large man admitted that the hosts had nothing but praise for Vlad, claiming he saw great potential in the boy. Moneybug told him to come find him whenever he got sick of the smell of burnt wax. He promised he would value having someone like Vlad on his payroll, but the loyal candle seller refused, saying he was happy where he was since they fed him, paid him, and gave him a home. Moneybug just laughed, pointing out that he could provide all that and much more. Realizing Vlad wasn't budging, he flipped a gold coin at him to pay for the broken candles. Our hero was visibly shocked, staring at the coin and stammering that it was too much. The man with the hook insisted he keep it, adding that there were plenty more gold coins waiting if Vlad ever joined his side. After leaving that tempting offer hanging in the air, the man reminded the boy of his name. Moneybug thanked George for the meal and walked out with his men. Our boy noticed the intruder looked strangely happy and wondered if the meeting had actually gone well. Just then, Xena called down from the upper floor, telling him George needed to see him. Later, Vlad stood in a room with George and Marcella. He stared, speechless, at an object in front of him. It was a beautiful, high-quality knife. George explained he had planned to give it to him later, but given the situation, he decided to hand it over now. He ordered Vlad to keep the dagger on him at all times. As the blue-eyed boy took it, he could feel the heavy atmosphere in the room. The meeting with Moneybug had clearly been a disaster. He looked around and saw the men sitting in gloomy silence. Even Marcella looked upset, confirming that serious trouble was on the horizon. That was when George dropped another bomb. Vlad had to stop selling candles. Confused, the boy asked what else he was supposed to do. Sensing the kids' worry, George revealed they had received a tip that one-armed Jack was smuggling outsiders into the slums. He believed these men were mercenaries, former knights. Vlad chimed in, nodding that meant they were just like George. With a grim look, George confirmed it, hinting at his own fear. The problem was, one-armed Jack already commanded a massive army of dangerous thugs. But in the past, George, a former knight, was a wolf among sheepy too strong for them to handle. However, now that Jack had hired swordsmen with knight-level skills, the delicate balance of power was completely destroyed. George admitted they were now the underdogs, and explained why they desperately needed Vlad on their team. Vlad was stunned that they thought so highly of him. George then announced that he would be receiving his first mission soon. This news caught the boy so off guard that he stood there, totally dumbfounded. Feeling overwhelmed, Vlad's mind drifted to Harbin, a man with no fingers, who couldn't walk. Yet, against all odds, Harbin used his brilliant mind to learn math and language. Those skills opened doors, allowing him to climb the ladder and eventually work for Captain Hoover. Harbin was Vlad's role model. He realized that with enough effort, he could learn anything, and knowledge would be his ticket to a better life. While the young man was training with his wooden staff, he started hearing that voice again. It told him to tighten the angle of his elbow as he swung. Vlad got annoyed that the voice had returned. You're probably wondering how he started hearing a voice in his head during training. It all began a month ago, right after he was struck by that jet black lightning. Since that day, the voice, which he was sure was a demonic whisper, echoed in his mind whenever he held a weapon. Frustrated, he tried to block it out, telling himself he needed to buy holy water before he even thought about getting a real sword from the blacksmith. He fought to ignore it, deciding the best course of action was to simply not reply. He gripped his staff again, trying his hardest to focus his mind and power into the strike. But just as he was about to move, the voice cut through his thoughts once more, nagging him to narrow his elbow. Without thinking, he listened to the command, and to his surprise, the result was vastly superior. In fact, he realized the strike followed the perfect path of a sword, a road that could turn him into a true master if he chose to walk it. He felt as though he were holding real steel, and for the first time, he started to wonder what in the world had taken up residence inside his mind. High in the freezing mountains, a man wiped fresh red blood from his steel blade. He muttered to himself, saying that while skill comes with age, the winter chill now bit deep into his old bones. Dressed in armor, he was clearly a knight. Suddenly, a rustle from the brush caught his ear. Someone was lurking there. A smirk curled on his lips as he called out, guessing the person was either a fool or trying very hard to act like one. The white-haired warrior stepped toward the sound and ordered the stranger to show themselves. Silence hung in the air for a moment before a voice spoke up, asking, "Are you Sir Stangga?" The scarred knight spotted the speaker and instantly knew who it was. The boy named Vlad, marked by his striking blue eyes and bright blonde hair. Stangga admitted he'd heard rumors of a slum kid matching that description. He chuckled, nodding that with looks like that, anyone else would mistake the boy for highborn nobility. Vlad ignored the compliment and got straight to business. He handed Stangga a sealed envelope sent by his boss, George. The knight broke the seal, and as he scanned the paper, a faint grin tugged at his mouth. The note explained that their enemy had hired a mercenary, a former knight, which finally explained why George was desperate for Stangga's help. Seeing the knight was interested, Vlad announced he would lead the way back to George, estimating a 2-night journey. He turned to leave, assuming Stangga would follow, but the older man just stood there and mocked him, saying it was unwise to trail behind someone so dim-witted. Vlad tried to defend himself, insisting he could at least find the way, but Stangga remained unconvinced. He told the boy that acting foolish proved he had no brains. Vlad bristled at the insult, but the knight silenced him with a sharp glare from his purple eyes. The young hero didn't know how to respond, but eventually Stangga sighed and agreed to come along. However, he made a dark promise. If the boy forgot the path even once, he would kill him on the spot. Vlad shot a glare right back and simply told the man to keep up, adding that he wouldn't let an old knight ruin his very first mission. The blonde guide turned his back again and started marching, leaving Stangga stunned. The boy didn't seem scared at all, even after the knight had tried his best to be terrifying. In fact, Vlad was completely ignoring the danger. This actually amused Stangga, who realized this fearless attitude must be why George favored the kid, though they had only just met. The knight could already see a spark in the boy. He was a child with the kind of potential worth protecting and growing. That night, the pair took shelter in a small cave. They built a fire and sat in a heavy, awkward silence. Eventually, Stangga felt eyes on him and realized Vlad kept glancing his way. Uncomfortable, he finally snapped, asking the boy why he was starring, as if he'd never seen an old retired knight before. The boy shyly confessed that it really was his first time seeing one. Stangga laughed and called him a country bumpkin, but Vlad countered by asking where the knight hailed from. When Stangga replied, "Dikia," Vlad gasped, nodding that was the most country place of all. Annoyed, the knight dropped the subject and pivoted back to his earlier threat, reminding the boy he would die if they got lost. With a cruel expression, he vowed to slice the boy in two if he messed up. Yet again, the threats bounced right off Vlad. He simply told the knight to stop saying such creepy things. While he unwrapped a packet of beef jerky, he casually mentioned hearing a rumor once that whenever knights make jokes, they are actually threats. Stangga ignored the comment. His eyes locked on the meat. He remarked on how fresh it looked and asked if there was a portion for him. The young hero explained that George hadn't given him much, then asked if the knight had his own supplies. Stangga frowned, revealing a few tiny, pathetic scraps of food that he looked at with pure disappointment. Vlad skewered his beef and held it over the flames. The savory scent drifted through the cave, making Stangga's mouth water instantly. Desperate for a bite, the knight proposed a trade. He would answer any question the boy had. In exchange for a piece of jerky, he insisted this was a rare chance Vlad should jump at. Chewing a mouthful, Vlad watched him with curiosity, weighing the offer. Finally, he broke the silence and bluntly asked how many pieces Stangga wanted, adding that he could just ask nicely. Stangga took offense, explaining that his dignity as a knight wouldn't let him beg for food. He declared that a knight only receives when he gives something in return, then crossed his arms and shut his eyes, refusing to budge. The boy pointed out that he was technically retired, but Stangga insisted he had lived by that code his whole life and wasn't about to break it now. Giving in, Vlad asked for his name, which the knight provided. Next, he asked for his age, and Stangga replied that he was 42, suddenly realizing he hadn't received any meat for these answers. The knight snapped and called him a brat. The hero simply ignored the name-calling and moved on to his next query. He asked the retired warrior if he knew how to use aura. Hearing this, Stangga grinned, nodding that the boy looked innocent, but clearly knew more than he let on. He explained that not every knight can wield aura, and that possessing the power is very different from actually being able to use it. Vlad sensed the man was dancing around the topic, so he asked plainly, once more, if he could use aura or not. The knight smiled but paused, which made Vlad so nervous that he blurted out an offer to give him every piece of beef jerky, just to get a straight answer. After stalling a bit longer, Stangga reminded him of the rule. A knight takes only when he gives, to settle the debt. He decided to show the boy something rare. He drew his blade, gripping it tight, and squeezed his scarred left eye shut. Confused, the boy asked why he was closing it. Stangga answered that he had to draw his inner world out. From the depths of his soul, his closed eye began to shine with a magical blue light. As he told the boy to pay close attention, suddenly, the steel blade began to glow with the same light, and Stangga declared that this was the true essence of a knight. The brilliant blue light intensified, beaming brighter and brighter. The aura flared with such power that Vlad was forced to throw his hands up to shield his eyes. Later that night, they reached the city outskirts. The retired knight grumbled about feeling filthy, but Vlad argued that looking dirty helped them blend in and avoid attention. However, Stangga clarified he wasn't talking about hygiene. He meant his mood. His knightly pride was hurting because he hated the idea of sneaking in through a hole in the wall. He demanded to know why they had to use this route. The guide explained that his orders were to bring him back secretly. Walking through the main front gate would destroy any element of surprise. Even after hearing the logical reason, Stangga crossed his arms and pouted like a 5-year-old child. Vlad urged him to keep moving, promising a hot bath once they reached their destination. As they they crept through the hidden tunnel, Stangga whispered about how unnervingly quiet it was. Vlad replied softly, telling him the place was dead silent, simply because it was the deepest part of the night. Suddenly, they froze, shocked by the scene ahead. Scattered on the ground were several dead bodies. Stangga asked if this was normal for the area, and the boy quickly assured him it was. Examining the corpses, Vlad guessed that the men had likely killed each other in a brawl. He abruptly suggested they separate. He gave Stangga directions to a secret rear entrance, used only by organization members. The knight looked at him with worry and asked where the boy intended to go. Vlad revealed he would head for the main gate, reasoning that it was smarter to divide the enemy's attention. As Vlad strode away, he called back that they would meet up soon. After a short trek, the hero reached the shop, only to find the place trashed and overturned. To his horror, he saw George covered in bandages and bleeding, while Marcella stood by his side, desperately trying to treat his wounds. When the former knight spotted Vlad, he praised the boy for returning alive. Grimly, he revealed that the Moneybug group had struck first. He admitted he had expected something like this, knowing that people with that much wealth usually possessed a dangerous level of power. Vlad looked at his boss with worry and asked if he was all right. George confessed that it had been years since he fought someone with the skills of a knight, which explained his heavy injuries. However, the boss pushed aside his own pain, more interested in knowing if Vlad had successfully brought Stangga back. Vlad confirmed he had found the man, but explained they split up to avoid the watchers at the main gate. He added that he sent Stangga to the rear entrance and that he should have arrived by now. George was relieved by the news, as he planned to launch a counterattack on Moneybug the very next day to end the war. He then asked how Stangga looked. Hopping, the veteran was in fighting shape. The boy confirmed the knight was healthy and added that he seemed like a decent person. George nodded, mentioning that Stangga had a warm heart, while Vlad noted that the old man was also surprisingly fast on his feet. The boss asked if the knight seemed thinner, remarking that a warrior must maintain his body to survive. Vlad then dropped a bombshell. He knew Stangga could use aura. Because of this immense power, the boy was certain they would crush their enemies in the coming battle. Instead of celebrating, George looked completely stunned that Stangga possessed such an ability. Just then, Vlad heard footsteps approaching and assumed Stangga had finally made it. But before he could greet him, George called out urgently, asking if he was absolutely certain he saw aura. Suddenly, the former knight snatched up his sword and ordered the boys to get behind him. In a terrifying twist, George revealed that the real Stangga never learned how to use that power. Before Vlad could make sense of the betrayal, the so-called knight stepped into the room, his sword and coat drenched in fresh blood. The imposter looked at George and remarked that he had traveled to a very distant place. He greeted the wounded boss with a menacing smile, saying it had been a very long time since they had last hunted one another. The scene shifts to a brief memory of the frozen peaks. We see the stranger wiping a crimson stain from his blade, casually chatting with the corpse he just created. He mocks the fallen man, telling him he couldn't hide his age forever, and joking that the biting frost must have seeped into his old bones. It was during this grim talk that a rustle in the woods caught his ear, leading him straight to Vlad. Back in the present, the fake traveler wears a cruel smirk. He looks at George and remarks on how much time has changed him since their last meeting. George, suspicious and tense, demands to know why he's surfaced now of all times. The stranger drops a bombshell. Count Jidar is dead. George recoils, clearly shaken to his core. The messenger adds that the death is being kept quiet for now due to political messes, but promises the whole world will know soon enough. The knight with the haunting violet eyes pours a drink, beginning to insult the memory of the late Count Jidar. He lifts his cup in a sarcastic salute to the pathetic ruler. Knowing exactly which buttons to press, George snaps, roaring an oath. He draws his steel and lunges at the man. The intruder doesn't even flinch. He just holds his glass high as a bait. At the very last second, he moves with a speed that defies logic. George's blade shatters the glass, leaving the onlookers gasping at the stranger's impossible reflexes. The man then toasts to the new leader, Sigund, which sends George into a blind fury, hailing a corrupt successor. After insulting a dead friend, George, despite his old wounds, swings wildly, but the man, now known as Godin, effortlessly catches the strike with his own sword. As their blades grind together, Godin reveals that Count Sigund's first decree is for the traitor George to be hauled back in chains. George spits back that Sigund is no master of his. Godin shrugs, admitting the Count knew George wouldn't come quietly, and honestly didn't care if he survived the trip. The two masters of the sword trade fierce blows, but Godin is far more fluid. He dances away from a strike aimed at his ankles and slips past a heavy slash meant for his chest. Seeing the room turn into a death trap, Vlad turns to Marcella and warns her to move. As the heavyweights clash, Vlad grabs her and pulls her toward the exit, making sure she's safe before the walls come down. Outside, the men on the ground floor hear the chaos and shout up to Vlad, asking what's happening. Vlad finds Burley and barks an order: get everyone upstairs immediately. He tries to explain that their leader is fighting for his life, but his words are cut short. George George comes crashing through the floorboards, sent flying by a massive blow. Vlad and Marcella watch in absolute terror. As George plummets, the men below are paralyzed, watching their commander fall. Just as George is about to hit the stones, Godin leaps through the jagged hole in the wall. He mocks George for always making the most idealistic, foolish choices. The old boss hits the ground with a sickening thud. As he lies broken, his confused men swarm around him. Their whispers die out. George begins to cough. From his high perch, Godin watches, purple eyes cold, predatory. Suddenly, a blade whistles through the air toward Godin's face. It's the very dagger George had given to Vlad. Godin reacts instantly, parrying the small blade, so it thuds into the wood nearby. Vlad's blue eyes burn with a rage that matches Godin's stare. After a tense heartbeat, Vlad charges at the intruder. As he leaps to strike, Vlad screams for George to move. George finds a final burst of energy and rolls clear. Just before Godin's sword buries itself in the floor, George stumbles to his knees, clutching his weapon. Once more, Godin rights himself and asks why George didn't follow orders in the past. George gasps he couldn't carry out such evil because he is a man of honor, not a monster. God sneers, reminding George he is a knight, not a common man. George growls, anger boiling over. His men move to back him up, seeing he is outnumbered. God decides the game has gone on long enough. He closes one eye, sighs, saying he's ready for a nap. Vlad recognizes the stance. He knows the aura is coming. He sprints forward, desperate to stop the technique. Before he can reach, Godin's eyes and steel begin to shimmer with a terrifying light. Ghostly blue lines mark George and his soldiers as targets. They are frozen, helpless. A massive explosion of energy rips through the room, throwing Vlad back, slaughtering George's men instantly. When the dust finally settles, Godin is gone. The floor is stained red with the bodies of the fallen. Vlad staggers up, groaning, only to be met by a nightmare. Everyone is gone. He looks down to see George's blood dripping onto the floor. His heart breaks as he stares at his fallen mentor. He remembers George, the man who pulled him out of the gutters when he was just a starving stray, the only one who ever believed in him, the strongest man he had ever known. But that strength is gone. Under the pale blue moonlight, Godin stands, holding George's severed head. The villain had decapitated the only father Vlad ever had. Vlad gazes at the gruesome sight, praying it's a hallucination. But reality sinks in. The monster he let into his home has destroyed his world. Choking back a sob of pure agony, he snatches up George's sword and lets out a primal scream. But just as he's about to strike, he hears the voice in his head telling him to stop. Regardless, he swings the blade with great force, but Godin easily dodges. Even if the attack wasn't a threat, the knight is shocked, seeing Vlad knew how to swing in the sword path. He's perplexed because a gutter kid shouldn't be able to do that. Then he remembers Vlad was struck by jet black lightning. Curiosity piqued, Godin is impressed. He admits it. Vlad doesn't care if he's impressed. He only cares about killing him. The enraged kid charges a second time, yelling for God to die. Godin blasts him with an attack, but Vlad twists his body, deflecting it, and lands a hit, sending Godin flying, even making him lose his sword. The imposter gets back to his feet, stunned. Vlad must have been born with a gift. He concludes that explains the instinctive twists, the deflections, even though Vlad's body hurts from twisting so rapidly. He falls, groaning in pain. The voice in his head tells him to take it easy, breathe, and don't lose focus. Vlad holds his side, curls up on the floor, groaning. Godin watches, thinking about killing him. He contemplates snuffing out Vlad's light potential, but ultimately decides it would be too wasteful, even though the boy could return stronger. The knight remembers when he and George were friends. George had once told him he found pleasure in watching over those with great potential. The memory brings a faint smile to Godin's face. He calls out to Vlad, still wincing in pain. He tells him a knight only takes a fair price. A perplexed Vlad asks what he means. Suddenly, Godin tosses back 2 slices of beef jerky that Vlad gave him in the cave. He tells him his name is Stangga, and he isn't 42 years old either. He explains the boy got an unfair price, which is why he's tossing back pieces to even the exchange. However, he declares he will still take George's head with him. Vlad stares in horror, once again at his master, bloody severed head. The imposter explains he's taking it as a fitting price for him as the victor. He says it with arrogance, pride, staring Vlad down, waiting for a response. The heartbroken kid, filled with rage, scowls at the imposter, vows to kill him. Godin scoffs, looks away in disappointment. He tells Vlad not to think about asking for a second price, especially given the state of his life. After that, Godin turns and starts walking away, leaving our hero fuming with rage. Vlad stays on his knees, tries to stand, gnashing his teeth, stuttering, vowing to kill the bastard who beheaded his master. The imposter ignores him, walks out of the shop, holding George's head like a trophy. Vlad yells, but he is ignored. The knight keeps walking, straight-faced, through the hole he made in the wall earlier. Our hero warns himself of the day he would come back to kill him. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Comment if you want next part of this manhwa.